Hey, hey, Tommy Tell the Truth here. What? It's 4:20 in California right now. Get on it. 4:20. I'm gonna start off with some songs and I'm gonna do my thing. Here we go.
And in case there are any conspiracy theorists out there, how would you prove to us that you're in zero gravity?
We don't have time for a meeting of the Flat Earth Society.
Mind control to Major Tom. Mind control to Major Tom. Hang the green screen up and put your wires on. Mind control to Major Tom. Mind control to Major Tom.
That does not sound right. Let's try Christian Knapp.
Well, they tell us they're exploring outer space, but it's all fake. It's fucking fake. $60 million every day is what we pay. They fucking take. 'Cause we're brainwashed, trained to believe man-made dark cosmology. A trap set by evil fuckers many centuries ago to dupe the population and take control of the world. Seen it all before, it's the oldest play in the book. Fiction for souls by baiting the devil's hook. Wizards and warlocks practicing evil and magic. Cooked up a plan and they called the plan science. Sprinkled all their bullshit with some formulas and math to make themselves look brilliant, 'cause only they understand. Gain the faith of the masses as they push theories and lies, trying to make us slaves and feel godless inside. Godless inside. So they try to make us godless inside. So we all roll over and say, go ahead, NASA. Have your fucking way. Why can't we see so much farther than they say? 50 miles plus across the ocean on a clear blue day. Why would they say it's a mirage you're looking at? Yeah, right, that's not science. That's just a load of bogus math. Use your eyes and a zoom lens. Spot an object far across the sea. That's all it takes to prove there's no bend to be seen. Look for any curve and it just leads you to the fact. We got hills and valleys, but the rest is flat. It's fucking flat. Ooh, it's fucking flat. Ooh, it's fucking flat. Ooh, it's fucking flat.
Whoa, whoa, a whole two people on YouTube watching. That's funny. Alrighty then. We're gonna play one more song. One of my favorite Flat Earth songs.
Hello, it's me. You know, indoctrination started while we were still naive. Programming our beliefs. That inertia is the reason we don't feel the earth spinning. Hello, can you hear me? Did you ever stop to question the confession of gravity as a theory? Funny thing, force alone can be explained with buoyancy and density. The sun is closer than what they've told us, not 90 million miles away. Hello from the inside. I'm here to tell you not to lie. And there never was a space probe, and those planets you've left so wandering stars. Operation Fishbowl.
Mellow Gold. Big Grower, Larry Cinch.
How are you?
Man.
Did you get a chance to join Flat Earth and Globe discussion group to discover all the truth?
Alrighty, maybe we'll pick that back up in a little bit here. So, in my Flat Earth research, and my hunt for the curvature, which doesn't exist, we know that. The only curvature is on your ass and your boobies. Anyway, so I have a picture that is supposed to be the first ever picture of the curvature of the Earth. Yeah. Get ready to laugh. All right, where is it? Gotta find it first. If I can find it. Where did it go? Oh no. It's not there. Huh. Well, crap. I guess you'll have to wait till the video to see it. Because I don't have it now. Imagine that. There you go. Let me look at it one more time in here. Shouldn't be in here, but okay. It's not. Yeah, so I downloaded it, but I don't know where it's at now. All right, so yeah, you're already laughing, I know. All right, so anyway, how about John Hopkins University? So that's what I was looking for, was John Hopkins University residue instead of John's, and I came across some old science TV programs that that John Hopkins put on. Of course, it's going to say John's, but anyway. So, and it's from the 50's, and I thought about it, and I said, well, in my Flat Earth research, I found Augusta Piccard, who went up in a hot air balloon, in a high altitude balloon, and he referenced that the Earth was flat. Of course, they didn't make a big deal about that, but so just about 4 or 5 years later, the military, U.S. military, thought, oh well, maybe we should do this too, and they started their own high altitude balloon testing, and so Hey Tina, haven't seen you in quite a long time. Yep, you're in Piccolo area. Your family is high. Good to see you. So anyway, I've never seen these shows. I mean, obviously, I wasn't around in the '50s when it came out, but even as a kid or adult, watching old space programs and stuff, in my research of, you know, uh, trying to get proof, that they didn't go to the moon and all that stuff. We know that NASA space is as fake as CV-19. All right, well, so it's called yeah. Oh, there it is. There's the picture I wanted to show you. Here you go, right here. So this is supposed to be the first ever picture of the curvature of the Earth. Well, please tell me where you see the curvature of the Earth in this picture. I mean, because there ain't much curve going on in this thing. I wish I could stretch it out longer for you, but so all I can do is, like that. Okay. So in this in this video, where the military shows where they did their high altitude balloon test, is they launched it from South Dakota. This is a picture of South Dakota. And this is supposed to be the very first picture ever taken of the curvature, showing the curvature of the Earth. I'll zoom in. It says first photograph ever made showing the division between the troposphere and the stratosphere, and also the actual curvature of the Earth, photographed from an elevation of 72,395 or 3 feet, the highest point ever reached by man at that point, of course. And so apparently that record, when they went up that high, they set a record for like 20 years before somebody beat that record and went up higher. But this is from the 1950s, folks, from like 54, 55. You're going to see in the video. But yeah, where's the curve? Do you see any curve? That looks pretty flat, all that to me, But they could have altered it, I guess. And okay, all right, now I see. Okay, I see what they're trying to say. So this is the curvature right here, right here, and this is the atmosphere, okay, or whatever. But I mean, that ain't much curve. But they probably, made that curve like that. What's up with this here? No, don't hide her, Cinch, man. She was just saying she's from Pensacola area, where I'm at. Tina's all right. All right, anyway. So, yeah. Look at that. It's ridiculous. All right, so here we go. We're gonna watch this. Yeah, let me get rid of that. No, we don't want that anymore. All right, and let me show you. This is the guy first, the Major General Orville A. Anderson. That they just, a number of years ago put him in the Hall of Fame. This is the guy that went up before we watched the John Hopkins science review from the 50s. There was 2 guys that went up in the balloon. And this is the main guy, though.
Major General Orville Anderson was a true pioneer of military aviation. His career began during the age of the dirigible and continued through both world wars. Along the way, he set groundbreaking aviation records, won numerous awards and commendations, and developed brilliant new tactics for aerial combat that helped redefine the role of air power in combat.
Our fighters peel off to meet the enemy threat, and the battle is on.
Anderson, a Utah native, attended Brigham Young University from 1914 to 1916. The following year, during the height of World War I, he enlisted in the aviation section of the U.S. Army Signal Corps as a private. His goal? To become an aviator. Anderson was told by an Army recruiter that he would be flying within weeks of enlisting. But once his official request for flight training was submitted, nothing happened. Undaunted, Anderson went instead to Balloon Observer School and won a commission as a second lieutenant. Soon, Anderson's exploits in lighter-than-air flight would land him in the record books. He served as both pilot and navigator of the record-breaking first transcontinental airship flight in 1926. Almost a decade later, Anderson would make history again as one of the pilots of a daring high-altitude balloon expedition called Explorer 1. The National Geographic Army Air Corps stratospheric expedition was designed to see how high a balloon could rise into the atmosphere. The Explorer 1's first attempt failed in 1934 when the massive hydrogen-filled balloon burst at an altitude of over 60,000 feet. Anderson and his crew were forced to bail out and parachute to safety. The next year, Anderson once again tried to break the high-altitude record in Explorer 2. Launching from the Stratosphere Bowl in Rapid City, South Dakota, Anderson achieved a record-breaking altitude of 72,395 feet, a record that stood for 16 years and represented man's highest journey above the Earth at the time.
Captains Anderson and Stevens reached heights no man had ever reached before, explorers of the stratosphere. The balloon rose almost 14 miles above the Earth and landed safely.
On the heels of his record-setting ascent, Anderson was already looking toward the future. He realized that airplanes could easily surpass the capabilities of airships in battle. So in 1933, he recommended that the Army Air Corps discontinue its airship programs.
All right, that was enough of that. So, dang, it was the 30s. No, this says 1952. Well, it might have been, I was thinking the show was in the 50s, so it might have been in the 30s when they did it. Yeah, my bad. All right, so let's see. Well, I didn't download the one I wanted to. Yeah, balloon school. What a joke. That's like saying you graduated from clown school.
The Johns Hopkins Science Review, presented by the Johns Hopkins University and WAAM in Baltimore. This is the Johns Hopkins University, famed for 75 years for its contributions to science and the humanities. Here in its many laboratories, Hopkins scientists are constantly probing into the still unknown secrets of science, which, when discovered, will be translated into benefits to be enjoyed by you, the people of America. Each week, we look over the shoulders of these scholars as they work and catch a glimpse of the results of their scientific research. This week, we will see the world from 78 miles up. To introduce tonight's program, here is Lynn Poole of the Johns Hopkins University.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another Johns Hopkins Science Review. Have you ever thought about one of the remarkable things about human beings is that we're never satisfied with anything? Now, I'm perfectly sure that this dissatisfaction, the fact that we're not satisfied with anything, is responsible for the great progress that we have made over the past centuries. Dissatisfaction with certain things makes for progress. Now, take, for example, the airplane. Man was never satisfied
22.
to be firmly rooted to the ground. He wanted to fly into the air, to fly in some sort of a machine that would carry him from one place to another. Let me show you these pictures, for example. The science of aeronautics is a fascinating study, and men from earliest times wanting to fly could never achieve this until in 1903, the Wright brothers built this crude contraption known as the flying machine. This first machine lifted a man but a few feet off the ground. But before very long, the Wright brothers had built another machine, this one. This machine flew one of the Wright brothers quite a few feet off the ground for about 35 seconds over the sands of Kitty Hawk in North Carolina. Well, from this time, the swift development of the science of aeronautics went on, and we all know that story. One plane took the place of another, and another, and another, until, before very long, giant airliners, such as this Martin 404, were flying from Los Angeles to New York, from Paris to Cairo, flying all around the world, all the time. But yet, we human beings are not satisfied. We want to go faster, and we want to go higher all the time. To satisfy this desire, scientists have built rockets, such as the one you see here. Rockets that can hurtle through the air at speeds of more than thousands of miles an hour. Now, it's one of these rockets that we want to talk about tonight. It's the rocket known as the Aerobee. Now, the Aerobee was developed by the Aerojet Engineering Company, the Douglas Aircraft Company, under the technical supervision of the Johns Hopkins Applied Physics Laboratory in cooperation with the United States Navy Bureau of Ordnance. This rocket continually flies through the air and brings back information that is important to scientists. As a matter of fact, it's very important to us, because when we're flying through the air at a later date, we have to know about the cosmic rays in the air. We have to know about the pressures. What effect does this pressure have on the machine that is flying through the air? How will man be able to fly through that air? Many questions have to be answered, and the Aerobee, this rocket, is helping find those questions. This Aerobee goes into the air, brings back much information, and is used for quite a number of purposes. We want to discuss one of those purposes tonight. But before we do, let's take a look at the Aerobee, find out how it flies and how it operates. And to show us this Aerobee, we have as our guest tonight Mr. Clyde Holliday, senior engineer at the Johns Hopkins Applied Physics Laboratory, who will give us a quick demonstration and a look at the Aerobee.
Thank you, Mr. Poole. The Aerobee, as seen in this diagram, is a long, slender rocket. It carries enough fuel to take it to 70 or 80 miles straight up. It's about 20 feet long, it weighs just over 1,000 pounds, and reaches a maximum velocity of around 3,000 miles per hour. The nose is sharply pointed and carries the many scientific instruments used in the experiment. This section carries the fuel, and here we have the rocket motor itself.
Wait till y'all see the space station.
This motor is made up of a complex system of tanks and valves and pipes and many other apparatus that contribute to its propulsion. On the rear, attached to the blunt end, we have a booster rocket that is necessary to give the initial thrust to get the Aerobee off the ground. Now remember this, because you will soon see a typical Aerobee takeoff. And just after the launching, this booster rocket will fall to the ground. After it has fallen, the rocket motor will take over and carry the Aerobee higher and higher into the sky. Now we have another photograph of an Aerobee rocket taking off from a launching tower at the White Sands Proving Ground in New Mexico. This rocket is launched from a fixed platform or tower so as to direct the rocket in the proper direction and have it to fall in the proper impact area.
The scientists sent this rocket aloft and got much information. But still, just like all human beings, the scientists were not satisfied. And we can be glad they weren't, because their dissatisfaction leads to the answers to new problems, the new problems in our universe of science. But this one day, a man posed a question. He asked, I wonder if we could put a camera in this rocket.
Here we go.
Send the camera aloft and have the camera take photographs of the Earth as the camera climbs into the upper atmosphere. Well, now, often in life, the man that asks the question is the man that has to solve the problem. That's exactly what happened in this case, because Mr. Clyde Holliday asked the question. And let's see how he solved the problem.
This is one of the still cameras designed for upper atmosphere photography. This camera has been used in 2 different rockets. And in spite of this very difficult and hard treatment, it has survived in remarkably good condition. Here is the lens and the shutter. The lens is in perfect condition. The shutter could be used again. This camera makes 4 by 5 inch pictures at the rate of about 1 every 2 seconds. After the film has been exposed, it is driven into this armored steel magazine. It protects the film at impact. Here we have a magazine similar to the one in the camera. And you can see
Good to see you,
that
Tony.
through this light-tight
Good
slit
Venom.
in the side of the
Brian.
magazine, the
Disciple.
film
Good
enters
man. Tina.
and is wound onto this take-up spool inside. After the film has entered the magazine, of course, it is then well protected on impact. This camera was placed in an Aerobee rocket and was fired at the White Sands Proving Ground in New Mexico. With this thought in mind, suppose we have a look at a typical Aerobee film.
Before the Aerobee takes off on its flight into the upper atmosphere, let's look again at this rocket.
Let's
We'll
go.
force the rocket to catapult through space. Now here is the Aerobee at White Sands on the desert, being taken to its launching site, where it is carefully and
Hey,
slowly
Jennifer.
lifted into a standing position, so that the steel launching tower can encircle the Aerobee, ready to set the
You're going to see flat Earth when it takes off.
rocket on a straight-up course. In the firm grasp of the launching tower, technicians swarm around the Aerobee, filling its body with final amounts of fuel, giving last-minute adjustments to the delicate instruments. Other technicians carefully check coverings. Every man knows his job, is prepared for the final touches before the takeoff. Now the final minute approaches. Wind balloons sent aloft for final wind calculations. On the launching tower, a few things remain to be done. The Aerobee encased in the tower stands poised for flight. Excitement grows. Everything on the ground is now ready. And in the blockhouse, protected from possible explosion, scientists are tensely awaiting the final signal. Here's the first warning. Flares streak into the sky. Here's the second warning. And she's off. Streaking into the air at tremendous speed, vapor and smoke trailing behind, beginning to twist and turn. The Aerobee rushes upward, higher and higher into the upper atmosphere.
These photographs show
What?
certain points of interest with remarkable detail. They were made with the camera that I showed to you just a moment ago. This is a photograph of the White Sands, where the White Sands Proving Ground gets its name. This is the area of the famous White Sands Monument National Park. Here is the little town of Alamogordo, New Mexico. And this is the Southern Pacific Railroad running from El Paso, Texas, on through Alamogordo and toward the west coast. And here we can see the Holloman Air Force Base and its various runways. The second photograph was made a few miles north of the one that I've just shown to you.
This is New
This is the
Mexico.
approximate location of the original atomic bomb site. Here we have the ancient lava beds, and here are the cloud formations with the small black shadows cast on the ground by the clouds from above. This is the horizon, some 800 miles from the camera. And this photograph was made just northwest of Las Cruces, New Mexico, along the Rio Grande River. Here we have the Elephant Butte Reservoir, and on down the river, the Cavallo Reservoir. These reservoirs supply water for irrigation purposes to these little farms along the river just below. And now
Check this out.
Another photograph.
Now look at this, a view from Airbnb 70 miles up. Look at this flat, huge area. Check it out.
Photograph made by the cameras on a trip by the Aerobee. We were able to find enough photographs to make a mosaic that forms a 1,400-mile spread from the horizon to the north in upper Wyoming to the south in central Mexico.
1,400 miles of flat earth, y'all.
The total area of this photograph covers over 300,000 square miles. Here again we can see the White Sands. In this area is the White Sands Proving Ground headquarters from which the rockets are launched. The rockets are launched from here, they travel upward in space and fall in this area here. Over to the right we have the ancient lava beds, and in here is the Sandia mountain range in Albuquerque, New Mexico. This mosaic, to the best of our knowledge, is the largest land area ever photographed with such detail in so short a time.
I'm sure it's tremendously exciting for us to see these photographs and realize that they were taken from a rocket that was 70 miles above the Earth, and to see these photographs with such great clarity and such detail. But we also realize that such a project, the building of such a rocket, sending it that far above the Earth, is a tremendously costly thing. Also, that scientists have worked laboriously for hours, weeks, and really for months to get a rocket ready to prepare a camera to go at that height. And probably a question comes into our minds. Why is it that scientists want to send these rockets that high in the air? What value is there in such a project? Well, let's turn that question over to Mr. Holliday and ask him to answer it for us.
There are many reasons for justifying the making of this photograph. One of the most important, and perhaps one of the most interesting, is the fact that we need some means through which we can determine the orientation or the exact position of the camera in space. For instance, to reduce the cosmic ray data, we must have some idea of just where the rocket is pointing. The Geiger-Müller tubes are placed in the rocket in such a manner that we can tell the intensity and the direction from which they came. However, unless we know the exact position in space of this rocket, we would not be able to reduce the data. Another interesting reason is to obtain as much meteorological data as possible, such as the way these cloud formations look from tremendous altitude. And the third reason that we can mention here.
That sounds like a prequel to geoengineering. They wanted to see how the clouds looked from up in space. They wanted to see if they could see through the clouds or if they could hide, use the chemtrails they were planning on doing to hide, whatever.
Is the possible use that we might make of such a device for long-range reconnaissance over inaccessible areas, such as jungle areas or polar regions, or in the time of war, over enemy territory.
The success achieved from sending a rocket up into the air and taking photographs, and the very obvious importance of these photographs to all of us, led the scientists to...
Yeah, don't leave yet because we got the video footage fixing to come up too. So they didn't just take pictures; they took video.
ask themselves another question. And this question was, do you suppose we could put a motion picture camera in a rocket, send that up into the upper atmosphere, and get motion pictures of the Earth as they fall away, as the Earth falls away from the rocket, so we could record this in action as the rocket goes up? Well, now, of course, as you suspected by this time, the man that again asked the question was Mr. Holliday. So the question was turned over to him to find out whether a motion picture camera could be placed in the rocket and sent up to the altitudes of 78 miles above the Earth. How did he solve this question? He can tell us and show us the camera.
Here is one of the first cameras that we made. This is a very modest little camera. It used 35 millimeter film and only 50 feet. It operated at a rate of about 3 frames per second.
3 frames per second.
As in the other camera that I have shown you, the film was driven into this film magazine to protect the film from the forces of the impact. This particular camera was used on 2 rockets. One rocket established the record for V2 flight in this country. In spite of the fact that it has been used for 2 different rockets, certain parts of the camera are still in operating condition. For instance, the shutter here could still be used again. Now I would like to show you a more modern version of a high-altitude camera. This is called a dual 35 millimeter camera. It has a lens.
I just noticed up on the wall back there, he has a fake curvature picture on the wall. So they were photoshopping pictures of the Earth before NASA.
On either end. It has 2 complete camera mechanisms inside. It is placed in a rocket so that when the rocket is pointing straight up, the camera looks out horizontally from each side. Now I would like to show you the inside of this mechanism. The camera film is protected by the same sort of film magazine that we have used in all of the other cameras. This type of magazine has been so successful that we have not to date lost any film because of magazine failure. The camera is driven by a common motor so that both films can be operated in a synchronous manner. The supply spool is just back of the take-up spool, and the film comes from the supply spool across here and down through the intermittent motion mechanism, and then after exposure it is driven into the cassette and is wound up on this reel. Now I will show you how the camera actually looks in operation.
This is before that. This is 1934.
By the way, I would like to show you
when they were using it.
A lens that we have used on one of these cameras. As amazing as it may seem, these lenses, as delicate as they are, often, more often than not, survive a terrific impact on the desert floor. This lens, as a matter of fact, made the motion pictures that we are about to show you now.
All right, here you go. Here's the video, Flat Earth.
This film of the preparation and launching of a captured German V2 rocket is being shown through the courtesy of the Jerry Fairbanks Studios. The film of the Earth was taken by the Hopkins Applied Physics Laboratory. Here the giant V2 rocket rolls across the desert. In a tremendous tower, the rocket is raised into firing position for final instrumentation and last-minute adjustments. Technicians perform their work with skill and precision.
Rocket Man!
Now the camera is ready to be slid into place in the rocket at this point to film the Earth during the upward journey. And here is Mr. Holliday sliding his fantastic camera into a slit in this tremendous rocket, placing it carefully so that it will not be shaken or broken during its upward journey, so that it will not be crushed when it strikes the Earth on its return trip from 78 miles up. Technical operations completed, weather balloons are sent up to check again the wind direction, to make calculations and corrections. Outside the blockhouse, lines are ready, launching activities complete. Inside the blockhouse, hundreds of dials, coils, and scientific equipment must be set, checked, and prepared for the firing of the rocket. Must be ready to record the information which will be sent back to Earth by delicate instruments within the rocket. There's the warning flare. Rocket ready. 20, 19, 18, 17, 16, 15. Fire. With a tremendous roar, the rocket ignites. Flames burst from its tail. Lumbering like a prehistoric monster, the rocket climbs up through its launching tower and begins its journey up into outer space. Now the rocket is hurtling through the air at incredible speed. It leaves a smoke and vapor trail behind it. Our cameras on the ground move to catch the ascent, while electronic equipment follows the course of the rocket as it begins to zigzag its way aloft. Now the cameras in the rocket are grinding, filming the Earth as the rocket moves further up into the atmosphere. At this moment, you are looking straight down at the world, looking down from a rocket at a height greater than any man has ever flown. Watch the Earth as it falls away from the rocket. Tall mountain ranges are in the background. Peaks thousands of feet high are flattening out. The rocket rolls toward these high mountain ranges, which now appear to be mere anthills from this great height. And gaining speed, the rocket rolls more. Look closely as the Earth spins by, and you will see the curvature of the Earth. The curve of distant horizon. A dramatic proof that Columbus was right.
What are they doing? What are they doing?
Flat mesas, more mountain ranges, rivers, lakes, towns, and long lines of railroad tracks are all rolling by as the rocket continues to twist its way aloft. This is even more than a bird's eye view of the world. It is higher than any bird could fly. We are being catapulted through the air at speeds of more than 3,000 miles per hour. Yes, we are 78 miles above the Earth and looking down at the ancient lava beds 700 miles away from the rocket. Lava beds left by live volcanoes more than 2 centuries ago.
Yeah, hey man.
Here we have a view of the famous Gulf of California stretching its long distance way below, 78 miles below us. We have reached the maximum.
Flat.
Now we begin our fall toward Earth, rocket and camera plummeting toward the ground like a giant's boulder. And on the way down, here again is the Gulf of California. This is a flight into the upper atmosphere. A flight on which we have been able to view the Earth from 78 miles straight up.
We're glad that we've had the opportunity of showing these films, and I'm sure that the men who developed the art and the science of still photography, and those men who developed the art of motion picture photography, would be proud and happy if they knew today what use was being made of their discoveries and their developments. They would be happy to know that their cameras, developed to the state that they are, can take photographs from 70 miles up in the air. We're also happy that we've had the chance to show you these films, the only films in existence of the world from 70 and 78 miles in the air, because this week we are being joined by a number of new stations on our network. Stations in Boston, out on the West Coast, down in the South as far as New Orleans. We want to welcome the viewers in those cities and tell you that each week we will try to bring you a worthwhile and an entertaining program. And next week, we hope that all of you will be with us when we have the privilege of presenting the story of a parchment.
Is that toilet paper I
We hope
see?
you will join us next week for a story about a piece of parchment. A parchment which is part of our national heritage of democratic freedom. This precious document is housed in the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C., where it is exhibited in a shrine for all to see. 150 years old in June, this parchment has disintegrated, and it was feared that the forceful words would fade from the surface of the document. It has now been preserved for all posterity.
You quit wiping your ass with it, it would stop fading, I bet. All right, so I wish I had part 2. Oh, wait a minute. Let me see. Yeah, I'm going to play a song because I need to find something real quick. Anyway. So, we'll play Paradox and Oxide.
When Mandela affected, oh no, where did that go? Mandela affected, oh no. I said we going Mandela affected, oh no, where did that go? And we all infected, oh no. I said daydreamer, dream.
They said I'm just a daydreamer, dreaming with my head always motherfucking in the ceiling. But it seems that the shoes got that hexing. Y'all ain't really fucking seeing y'all affected, but now you got 6 holes in your fucking face, man. What is you been sleeping? No one is mistaken me for logically frustrated, cause now I know that there's always been 6 people seated in the JFK assassination. But of course all the vets know let's go where it went. Logically frosty, he shouldn't be like this. Honestly, he should be cold as shit. Does he need a scarf and what's the point of it? Be careful what you wish for in the Matrix glitch. Where I'm fucking from, it wasn't like this, but at least it's nice to know I'm not alone in shifts.
When Mandela affected, oh no, where did that go? Mandela affected, oh no. I said we going Mandela affected, oh no, where did that go? And we all infected, oh no. I said daydream.
These shifty bastards, your wrists are tethered as your pulses under your thumb no longer centered. Your shrinking factor here and after, not even talking that quick, it's just that time is moving faster. You're lost in the facts since reality's hack, bitch. Like summoning demons with these dancing tactics, like Sam psychiatric, blending semantics, losing your stars and stripes as the demons demanded, running in circles, but to whose advantage? It's a sense from the creators while on Satan's sandwich. No longer get scared from Ricky Ricardo's laughter. In fact, I slap a bitch just to hear someone in the chatter, like someone in a bar quoting it like it matters. Cause this isn't my home, it's a splaining disaster. How the fuck could this be? Someone tell me, yo, can't say.
When Mandela affected, oh no, where did that go? Mandela affected, oh no. I said we going Mandela affected, oh no, where did that go? And we all infected, oh no. I said daydream.
The CGI. If NASA lets it alone.
Rockets into the sea, and they're faking that life ISS feed. No matter how high you go,
Or get.
horizons rise to
All right. So let's see what we got here. Wow, that's still downloading. Oh, I guess because I'm live. Yeah. All right. Well, we're gonna play Christian Knapp. Well, we just did we just play him? Well, we'll play another Christian Knapp or something. How about that? Yeah. There we go.
Watching the sun bake, thinking it looks fake. All of the skies outside are covered in goo.
7 minutes until 4:20 somewhere.
Smoking a big dew, watching the YouTube.
Vlad the
Time
Paimon.
to go in now, but what can he do? Stabley's going live again in Centerville, searching for truth, taking some calls. Some people claim something wrong with his brain, 'cause he knows we don't live on the ball. Chatting and ranting about the moon landing, community strikes and hate speech on YouTube. But he's such a cutie when he shakes his booty. He says Neil deGrasse and Bill Nye take the loop. Stabley's live tonight, but not in Centralville. No one even knows that's now what it's called. All of his subs know he's not gay or insane, but they know he's got something for Paul. Stones and flip-flops, big man and his truth drops. Plenty of proof that our memories are good. Mandela affected, the facts are collected. It's a beautiful day now in this neighborhood. Stabley's streaming truth tonight in Centerville. Karen be on, call her watching the chat. Some nothing to gain, but we know it's still and it's flat. The Panama Canal runs north to south now. Most people claim it was once east to west. It's not magic mirror, but we can see clearer. Cause everyone here knows that we're the fucking best. Woo! Stapley's premiering videos tonight in Centerville. He might be at work or even in bed. Sometimes he claims he's going live on the main, but it don't.
He gets Stapleyed.
He gets Stapleyed instead. Everyone, he gets Stapleyed instead.
3 minutes to 4:20 somewhere. Speaking of getting Stapleyed, what? Y'all better get it ready. And it says I got 15 seconds left, so we're right in there on time here. This is going to be John Hopkins Science Review. Man will conquer space. Yeah. No, he won't. No. No. Dun, 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 dun. Let me give a shout out to my favorites in the house. Christian Knapp, what? Who we were just listening to perform, our favorite one-man band. Yeah, baby. Singeman, Wes F.E. We have R.T. We have Vlad Pyman. Oh, yuck. Mad Pyman. Blind Spot. We have Larryology the Young. Dr. Evals. He wants his own rocket ship in space. Ha. You know he does. Charles Harrington. I think Charlie Harrington, sorry. My eyes aren't as good as they are. Jennifer Kingsling. Bit of Venom. Marky Rizzo. Brian Stavelide. Tina Richardson. Disciple of Messiah 1. And others. All right, let's go back down. Anybody else want a shout out? Just let me know. Okay. All right, so it is done, and we're going to watch this series from 1952 that was on TV in the 50s that Johns Hopkins University put out. All right, let's get to it. Let me go over here, pull it out, get rid of that, and get rid of that. We'll put it in showbiz. Replace the rest of that shit. Shit. Okay, we won't worry about that. We'll just play it right here. Open with. Oh yeah, I guess we can only open it. I don't have DLC downloaded yet. All right, check this out.
In 25 years, human beings will fly out into space and land on the.
Okay, 1952. He just told you within 25 years of 1952, man will fly in outer space and go to the moon. He says so confidently. Still haven't done it to this day, but yeah, you know.
Moon. We know this is true. Man will conquer space.
Man will not conquer space because God has not given him the authority to. Sorry, my turn. It's 4:20 somewhere.
The Johns Hopkins Science Review, presented by the Johns Hopkins Institutions and WAAM in Baltimore. This is the Johns Hopkins University, famed for 76 years for its contributions to learning and scientific research. Here in the many laboratories, Hopkins scientists are probing into the secrets of science, which, when discovered, will be translated into benefits to be enjoyed by you, the people of America. Each week, we are privileged to look over the shoulders of today's scientists and catch a glimpse of their research. On this, our 178th showing of the Hopkins Science Review, we present the first episode in 3 programs, showing how man will conquer space. To introduce this program on space travel, here is Lynn Poole of Johns Hopkins.
I have an airplane ticket here in my hand, and this airplane ticket is for a round-trip flight from Baltimore to Los Angeles. Now, if I offered it to you, you wouldn't be amazed. You
Oh, I bet Brian would like to talk about that flight.
might be happy, but you wouldn't be amazed because those flights are usual every day. But I wonder what you'd say if I offered you this ticket.
No thanks.
Now, this ticket is for a round-trip passage, a round-trip flight to the moon. Now, it's a first-class ticket, and if I actually offered it to you...
The moon is a balloon.
You might tap your head and point at me, but if you did, you would be wrong, because such a ticket will be used one day. Because one day, man will fly from our Earth up through the atmosphere and out into space and will land on the moon. Haven't you ever daydreamed about such a trip? If you have,
That's all y'all
come
done.
with
That's
me
all.
in
That's
your
it.
imagination and imagine that you are on a rocket headed outward into space. What would you encounter out in those regions?
Your rocket will leave the ground with a tremendous roar, gaining greater speed as it rises higher and higher. Passengers will look back at the Earth as the rivers and flat plains grow dimmer and dimmer.
He said flat plains.
They will peer down on our highest mountains, which will then appear to be nothing but tiny anthills on the face of the Earth.
Flat.
Still looking backward, the space-bound passengers will see the Earth as it grows smaller and smaller, as it begins to fade in the distance. But as the rocket ship hurtles through space, the passengers will look through the forward portholes, will peer through the strongly shielded windows on the sides, and realize for the first time how vast is this limitless area we call outer space. As they speed along, they will know that around them, millions of miles apart, are 9 major planets. Our Earth is one of these planets, all of which are cold and can be seen only because they reflect the powerful fiery light from the sun. Next comes Mercury, Venus, our Earth, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, and finally Pluto. Perhaps the passengers will catch sight of some of the few billions of meteors in constant motion in our solar system.
Flight hurt.
They will see the stars, which, unlike planets, give off light. And stretching millions of miles beyond our solar system are other solar systems, known as galaxies, tremendous clusters of stars which take their place in the vast area of the total universe.
Well, it's a mighty big universe, isn't it? But before we can use this ticket and go out into space, we must force our way up through the Earth's atmosphere. Now, what is this atmosphere? How high does it go? How far does it extend? And how far have scientists gone in learning how they can push their way through that atmosphere? Well, now, let's leave our fantasy and let's come right down here on Earth. And let's talk with the scientists and find out what are the facts. What are the facts about spaceflight? Well, now, there are questions which must be answered and can be answered by someone well-versed in astrophysics. And one of the people that can answer those questions is the director of the Laboratory of Astrophysics
It's
and
not
Physical
a
Meteorology at the Johns Hopkins University, Dr. John Strong.
The Earth's atmosphere is very interesting, Mr. Poole, especially the upper air, which separates the region where we live and navigate from the vast emptiness of space. It is like this. This is a globe which represents the Earth, and this is a canopy of the upper atmosphere which protects us from the ultraviolet light and meteorites of outer space.
Look at the dome.
The air in which we live and navigate is densest at the surface of the Earth, and it gets thinner and thinner as one goes higher and higher in the atmosphere. You are all familiar with the problems which this thinning of the atmosphere poses for mountain climbers and for aviation. When you travel by plane and take off from the ground and rise to 3,000 feet altitude, the air is thinner, but you are still comfortable and safe. At 5,000 feet altitude, you will notice the air is getting thinner, unless the pressure in your cabin is regulated to remain the same as it was on the ground. At 10,000 feet, you must breathe supplementary oxygen to remain comfortable. At 20,000 feet, it is necessary to have supplementary oxygen to remain alive. Beyond this, both pressurization and oxygen are required. Without them, you could not live, even a short time. Let us consider the structure of the atmosphere as the astronomers and rocket scientists do. First comes the troposphere. This is the cloudy part of the atmosphere, and it extends up to about 10 miles height. It gets colder and thinner.
Look at that, South America directly under North America. Now there's some residue for you.
The higher one goes. Next comes the stratosphere. This extends to about 60 miles high. Although it gets thinner, it remains almost constantly cold the higher one goes. Finally comes the ionosphere. This layer, extending from 60 to 120 miles in height, gets its name from the fact that it contains electrically charged particles, or ions. These ions are useful to man since many radio stations could not transmit beyond the horizon of their antennas if these ions did not reflect or bounce the radio waves around the curved contour of the Earth's surface. Beyond the ionosphere, our atmosphere compares in thinness or emptiness to the best vacuum man can produce. Beyond the 120-mile boundary of the ionosphere, you are in the region called the exosphere, which extends outward to infinity. In the exosphere, where man will make his expeditions in space, he will have to be protected from harmful ultraviolet rays and meteorites. The oxygen and ozone in the protecting upper air filters out the most harmful short wavelength ultraviolet rays. Billions and billions of meteorites dart out of space each day in our atmosphere, but fortunately,
Yeah, I like your comment. Dude sounds like Admiral Byrd reading a script. I can personally attest that Admiral Byrd's statements about the mountains, coal resources in Antarctica are totally and 100% bullcrap. Hey, Patrick, good to see you. So, you know, everybody back in the day that was anybody, you know, in science and government and space, they were all CIA or wanted to be. They were, you know, eligible to be whatever. But, you know, so, you know, these guys were all reading the same CIA script, the same DARPA script, the same NASA script. Yeah, it's a script, all right. It's a script to a fantasy sci-fi movie that's all it is. It's just an ongoing movie. They'll never make a real version of.
They do not bombard us at the bottom because when they enter the upper atmosphere, their swift motion creates a friction and causes them to be heated, ignited, and burned to harmless dust before they penetrate to the Earth's surface. Only the largest ones reach the surface, and this only occurs rarely. Thus, if it were not for the protecting canopy of the upper air, the unfiltered ultraviolet rays and the falling unimpeded meteorites would destroy every living thing on Earth.
Well, now, so far we have seen something of this vast universe of ours, have seen the layers of the atmosphere through which we must push our way to reach space. And we realize that we must protect ourselves out there against the flying meteorites, against the ultraviolet rays, and many other things which might harm us. Well, now, we know that a vehicle can carry us out there one day, but before we can send men out there are certain problems which must be overcome. These are problems, these are hazards, which the scientists must overcome and must solve before we can go into space. Now, to discuss these problems and these hazards of life, we have brought for you from California a well-known astrophysicist who can answer many of these questions for us and tell us with what we must contend in space. He is from the Institute of Transportation and Traffic Engineering of the University of California, Dr. Heinz Haber.
You're correct, Mr. Poole, if you say that the engineering problem is only half
I am Adolf Hitler's cousin.
of the story of conquest of space. There is also the human question. We must ask ourselves, will it be possible for man to survive in space? Will he be able to live if he is pitted against the utter void with no oxygen? There is no atmospheric pressure. There are all sorts of radiation, ultraviolet, cosmic radiation, and he will also be without weight. He will be floating without weight. Now, among those problems, the oxygen problems has been with us for quite a while. And we are happy to have tonight one of the newest developments. And this development will be shown to you by Dr. James Kennedy, who brought it down from right field where the suit has been devised and constructed.
Thank you, Dr. Haber. This is the Air Force T-1 altitude suit. It is the result of 6 years of research and development by the personnel of the Aeromedical Laboratory at Wright Field. This suit has been designed specifically to protect men against the hazards of exposure to extreme altitude. At 50,000 feet, unless man breathes oxygen under increased pressure, he will not survive. Above 63,000 feet, the fluids in the human body will boil at body temperature, and this will cause gaseous locking of the circulatory system and death within a few minutes. This suit is not an experimental garment. It is a production type suit and is being worn by about 150 people, Air Force and civilians. It has been worn on every high altitude flight of the X-1 rocket research aircraft, and on one flight, this aircraft was well above 50,000 feet and its cabin pressure was lost. The suit inflated automatically, delivering the oxygen from the emergency oxygen cylinder to the mask and to the suit, preserving the man's life and allowing him to live. I'll now have the Sergeant Lichty inflate the suit.
That's what Captain Kirk said, that it was like hell up there when he went up. If he went up, we know.
So you can see how it looks at altitude in the event cabin pressurization is lost. You'll notice moisture. Ordinarily, we prevent that by heating the face piece. Mr. Bill Bridgman wore this when he flew the skyrocket to 79,000 feet. This man is not as nimble as a ballet dancer, but he can do his job if necessary.
Such a suit would come in mighty handy in case
trying not to
in a
laugh.
flight in the upper strata of the atmosphere or eventually in space, one of those meteorites would come along. This piece, cosmic matter, at one time has traveled about 40 miles per second, and it might have punctured, and it could puncture the hull of a ship easily, and then an explosive decompression would result, against which such a suit would be a very effective protective measure. Now, besides the oxygen problem, we have spoken of radiation. Now, there are essentially two kinds of radiation that might be harmful to man. One of those you have experienced yourself on the beach when you got yourself a bad case of sunburn. The sun emits ultraviolet radiation, and I have here a source, a flashlight of ultraviolet light, which I should like to show to you. We can't see this type of light. However, it can be made visible by a fluorescent screen similar to the ones you have on your television screen. Now we have to put out the light in order to make this visible. I point this source against the screen, and you can see that the screen is bright. Now let's try this piece of paper. If I interpose this between the source and the screen grows dark. This shows that even such a flimsy medium as this sheet of paper is able to stop these rays. Now similar devices would have to be used later in front of the windows, the portholes of a ship. A simple piece of plastic also stops these rays, and
they just don't want them looking out to see the flat Earth.
it's a good way of stopping these rays with these simple means. However, ultraviolet rays are not the only ones. We have also to deal with cosmic radiation. These are atomic nuclei that come from the depth of space, plunge into the atmosphere, and in their passage through the air, they produce all kinds of secondary rays. I can give you an example of how these rays act. I have here a Geiger counter. It's a type instrument that is used in atomic laboratories and civil defense. Every time a ray passes through this instrument, you hear a click in the loudspeaker. Now let us try the piece of paper, whether we can shield it off. You see it still goes on, so it doesn't work. How about this piece of steel, half-inch thick, which is pretty heavy? Let's shove the Geiger counter below. Let's see what happens. You see the clicking still goes on. It shows that we cannot protect people against these radiations unless we use very heavy armor, such as 6 to 8 inches of aluminum, and of course such weights cannot be carried aloft. So we must ask ourselves, will there be any danger from these cosmic radiations? The answer is that we don't know. Not yet have we exposed experimental animals.
Oh, I just forgot that we're going to hear from Warner von, whatever his name is, the real Nazi dude. Yeah, he's in this too.
To this thin spray of cosmic radiation,
Whatever his name is.
And we are not yet prepared to pronounce space radiation safe. Now concerning the oxygen problem, it will become critical only in a case of an emergency. Concerning the radiation, man has no senses for their presence. So a man flying into the high altitude and eventually in space will, in the beginning, not find much difference between a normal high altitude flight or an actual space flight. There will be one thing, however, that will remind him drastically that space flight differs from conventional aviation. He will, upon leaving the atmosphere, he will become weightless. And this will be a very strange experience at best. Space and weightlessness will become synonymous like desert and thirst or Arctic and cold. Can you imagine what it will be like to exist in a realm where there's no gravity, where there's no up and down? Man will literally be suspended on a universal flying trapeze, rising, falling, twisting and turning. Unless kept anchored to a chair or bunk, weightless man will helplessly float about the entire space of his confining cabin. Now, it is a matter of common knowledge that weightlessness is brought about in space, but equally common are the misconceptions. how this comes about. Some people believe that if we detach ourselves from the Earth far enough, finally we may reach a point where the gravity becomes negligible. Or it is argued, if this would represent the moon, there is a point in between the two bodies, about here, where the action of the two bodies pulling in opposite directions cancel. However, this is not the case. Weightlessness is brought about by lack of support. And you all have felt weightlessness, or at least reduced weight in an elevator. When it starts going down, the rope slacks, and then you are being deprived of a certain amount of support, and you get this strange hollow feeling in the pit of your stomach, which tells you that you are about to get weightless. Weightlessness is actually not a attribute of space.
Hey, Brenda, good to see you.
I want to show you a weightless bottle right here in the studio. I can do this simply by taking away the support from this bottle. Now, if I do this, it falls down. Now, I will make it differently. First, let us take the bottle and see how it looks like when it is weight. When there is weight. The water is about 800 times heavier than the air, and if I shake it and get some bubbles into the water, you see they come up immediately because the water is heavier than the air. Now, I do the same thing, but I'm going now to pitch the bottle way up into the air. I hope I won't drop it. And then you watch the bubbles that float about in the bottle because they're weightless, they will stay there. Let me do it again. Once again. You see, this is weightlessness right here in the studio.
And that's water finding
now,
level
if man
time.
will enter a spaceship, he will then be just like one of those bubbles. He will float about in space, and he will then be weightless, such as these bubbles right here in the bottle.
Things are floating in space because they have no support, no pull from gravity. So, like the water and air bubbles in the gallon jar, objects in space have no weight. At first, the experience may be such a shock that the spaceman may claw desperately as he tries to get hold of something. As his spaceship is in free flight, or as he floats outside a space station, he will have to overcome this psychological reaction of fear to this weightlessness
Wait till y'all see the space
in order
station.
to carry on his
you.
work. This means that psychology
first
will
space
play a
station
part
they
in
designed.
space travel. It will be a problem to be overcome. Our actions are based on accustomed body coordination, based on lifelong experience with gravity. This coordination will fail us out in space. The first quick movement of a man rising from a chair will send him coasting off into space. But man's aerial antics are not the only floating objects to be considered. Tools, pencils, and even the paper on which he keeps scientific records will float around the cabin of the spaceship unless securely anchored. To overcome this, all metal instruments must be made of steel, or at least have a steel strip on the instrument. These can be held snugly in place when pressed against a magnetized panel, similar to the magnetic board which holds knives for the housewife in her kitchen.
I've never seen one of those. In somebody's house.
Now, all this may sound and look a little funny to you, but actually behind these
Yeah,
things,
you look a little funny.
there are
Talk a little funny.
questions we have to answer. We must assume that man will have some trouble in controlling his body movements under conditions of weightlessness. He may even become disoriented. But how about circulation? How about digestion? How about breathing? Will it be possible? Can, for instance, somebody eat upward, something like that? Now, for that purpose, we have here a young lady. She's standing on her head, and you see she drinks against the force of gravity. And this is possible because these functions, also such as circulation and respiration, are being powered by elastic forces.
Hey,
which
it's
do not
Mad's,
require the help of gravity.
It's Mad's girlfriend. Look, she's upside down in Australia.
These conditions and these functions do actually go on undisturbed was shown in some experiments made by high altitude research rockets. You see here, rocket rising and animals, monkeys and mice, have been brought above by these research rockets, and just like the bottle which I tossed upward a minute before, the monkeys were weightless, however much longer, because the rocket is a better tosser than then it can be better done than with this bottle. And these animals lived through, and this has shown that the normal physiological functions are not grossly disturbed by the lack of weight. Now we must ask ourselves, are we justified to do such research, spend money and time on these studies?
No.
After all, the next flight to the moon...
NASA doesn't ask you that. NASA just takes money. Listen to he.
Because the rocket is a better tosser, then it can be better done than with this bottle.
I can't believe he'd even put that out there.
And these animals lived through, and this has shown that the normal physiological functions are not grossly disturbed by the lack of weight. Now we must ask ourselves, are we justified to do such research, spend money and time on these studies? After all, the next flight to the moon is in no way around the corner.
It's never!
It will take quite some time before the first man will fly through space or even land on an alien body. But many of these problems of high-altitude flight are similar to those in space flight. I have here in my hand a model of the Douglas skyrocket, which was flown to an altitude in excess of 70,000 feet. Now this craft, if I tell you that it was that high, actually was some sort of a spaceship. 70,000 feet gives not a good picture. Let us express it differently. At that altitude, 96% of the atmosphere were below the feet of the pilot and only 4% were above. At that height, he had all the problems of the oxygen. He had to wear the suit, and if he would have flown another 50% higher, he would have entered the realm of the cosmic radiation. And so the problems of space, the human problems, are gradually creeping in. And still we can say that we are flying through space with these rocket aircraft, although we can do it only for a few minutes.
As Dr.
What
Haber has
they claim
pointed
they
out,
could
one
do
of the
now. So they're only doing now what they claimed they could do back then. They're only claiming to do what they, they haven't gotten any further past that technology of just going up into the upper atmosphere for a few minutes that they call space.
the first step toward reaching space is satisfying ourselves that men can live out there in space. They must be protected against the meteors. They must be protected against the ultraviolet light, the cosmic rays. They must be provided with pressure suits so that they can live and live comfortably in this space. All of these men are working on the scientific facts. These are the facts about space travel. Now, of course, the next step is how are we going to construct a rocket? A rocket that will reach out into space, out into atmosphere. And we believe that engineers will be capable of constructing a rocket that will penetrate our atmosphere and reach space.
Penetrate.
Astronautical engineers tell us they can construct such a rocket. How will they build it? What will it look like? How will it be propelled? How fast must it travel to leave this Earth? We hope you will be with us next week when Dr. Francis Clauser of Johns Hopkins University and Dr. Martin Summerfield of Princeton University show us how astronautical engineers plan to build a spaceship, when they tell us step by step how this rocket will be catapulted out into space. Be with us for the second chapter of How Man Will Conquer Space.
We'll never conquer space.
Your narrator has been Joel Chaseman. Parts of this program have been mechanically reproduced. The Johns Hopkins Science Review originates in the studios of WAAM in Baltimore. The Johns Hopkins Science Review, presented by the Johns Hopkins University and WAAM in Baltimore.
Yep, R2.
This is the Johns Hopkins University, famed for 76 years for its contributions to learning and scientific research. Here in the many laboratories, Hopkins scientists are probing into the secrets of science, which, when discovered, will be translated into benefits to be enjoyed by you, the people of America. Each week, we are privileged to look over the shoulders of today's scientists and catch a glimpse of their research. On this, our 178th showing of the Hopkins Science Review, we present the first episode in 3 programs showing how man will conquer space. To introduce this program on space travel, here is Lynn Poole of Johns Hopkins.
Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another Johns Hopkins Science Review. You know, everybody all over the country is talking about space and space travel, and I thought you might like to see this issue of Collier's magazine, which has an article about space travel, a trip to the moon, by one of our guests who will appear with us next week. I also would like to thank Collier's magazine for loaning us some of the models that we're going to show tonight. Now, those of you that were with us last week know that we went up through the 120 miles of our Earth's atmosphere and pierced outer space. We found out about this great, vast universe that was around us. We saw some of the dangers that might lurk out there for men who were going to travel in space. The cosmic rays, the ultraviolet rays, the meteors, the comets, the lack of oxygen. And we saw that man will experience a very strange thing, weightlessness. He will float about helpless in space. Well, now, the next step on our trip to the moon and the conquering of outer space is the problem of how we're going to get there. Well, of course, astronautical engineers all over the world are working on this problem. They know many facts. They know what rocket propulsion is. So let us find out just exactly how a rocket is propelled. And we have as our guest the chairman of the Department of Aeronautics at Johns Hopkins, Dr. Francis Clauser, to tell us this.
Clauser.
Mr. Poole has asked me to come down from our aerodynamics laboratory at Johns Hopkins to tell you a few of the interesting things that aeronautical engineers and scientists are doing to make space travel possible in the future. I think that the question asked most frequently about space travel is, how will you propel a ship out in space? What will it push against? There's nothing out there for it to push against. You see, the automobile obtains its propulsion from the wheels on the pavement. All that the automobile engineer has to do is to shift the gears automatically, get rid of the clutch, and everyone is happy. However, with the airplane, the problem of propulsion is a bit more difficult. You see, there's no street in the sky for wheels to push against. Instead, the airplane must use propellers, which create a strong jet of air back, and it is the reaction from this jet of air behind the propellers that gives the propulsion to the airplane. Recently, aeronautical engineers have developed jet engines which are replacing the older propeller engines. These engines, although they are much more powerful and much lighter and can propel airplanes much faster, work on the same basic principle of propulsion. We have prepared a simple drawing which shows what goes on inside of a jet engine. You see, air is sucked in the front, compressed, mixed with kerosene, burned, and shot out the back in a high-speed burning stream. It is the reaction of this high-speed jet out the back that gives the propulsion. Let me emphasize again, it is the reaction of this jet that gives the forward push. It is not that the jet is pushing on the air. To understand this, we must remind ourselves of Newton's third law, which says that to every action
there
Opposite
is
and
an
equal
and opposite reaction. Let us see how this works.
React the D's.
Here is a picture of a boy and his wagon. In this case, the action is for the boy to jump in this direction. The reaction is for the wagon to be sent in this direction. Now, when the boy jumps like that, then the reaction sends the wagon backward. So much for the theory. Let's see what happens in practice.
Really?
Here I have my son, John. Johnny, we want to show the people how Newton's third law works. Now, what I want you to do is to jump off the wagon, and if Newton
I don't
is
think
right,
that's his son.
then the wagon should get a backward reaction. You ready? Okay. 1, 2, 3, jump. You see, the reaction sent the wagon backwards.
Oh my goodness.
Next, I want to demonstrate how this action and reaction can be used for propulsion.
In space.
I have here a small cylinder of carbon dioxide used to charge the ordinary seltzer water bottles. It contains gas under high pressure inside,
Zulu
and there's
in
a
the
cap
house.
here, which when I
Yeah,
puncture
man.
it, the gas will shoot out in a high-speed stream. That's our action. And the reaction will be for the cylinder to be sent in the other direction. Now, let's see how this can be used for propulsion. I'm going to put it in our little aeroplane here, like that. And then I'm going to puncture the cap. Now, a rocket works in exactly the same way. Here I have the ordinary 4th of July rocket. It contains powder inside, and when I ignite the fuse, the powder will burn and send a stream of flame out the back. This stream of flames is our action, and the reaction will be for the rocket to be sent in that direction. Now, we are going to fire a rocket so that you can see this happen. Let's watch while they ignite the 4th of July rocket. You see, the reaction comes from the burning powder gases being sent out behind. Now, Newton's law says that this will happen out in space just the same as it does down here on the Earth. And this is what we use as the basis for propelling rocket ships out in space. Our calculations show that the 4th of July rocket, such as this, is much too weak and too inefficient to be used for a ship that would carry men out beyond the limits of the Earth's atmosphere. Instead, we must have something much more powerful than that. Now, gasoline has much more energy in it than the powder in the rocket. Here I have a bottle of gasoline and an ordinary pipe cleaner. And you see, when I burn the gasoline, I get a rather vigorous flame. Now, here I have a stream of oxygen, and you will notice how much more intense the flame was when we had the oxygen on it. This is just the kind of a powerful reaction that we need to have a spaceship go out beyond the Earth's atmosphere. Now, we have a rocket
right here in the studio to show you what happens when we put the gasoline and the oxygen into a combustion chamber and have them burning. You see the flames are shooting out in an intense stream that has a great deal of power to it. How would we use this in a spaceship? We have prepared a simple drawing that shows how this would be arranged. First, we would have to have tanks of gas. First, a tank for the gasoline. Second, a tank for the oxygen. Pumps and pipes to carry them to the rocket motor, where they meet, burn, and are ejected out behind. This action is continuous with the fuel and oxidizer meeting, being ejected out behind. Engineers have developed rockets powerful enough to carry missiles up to altitudes of over 100 miles, where the air is so rare that there's a molecule here, a molecule there, and another molecule over here. These rockets have reached speeds of 4,000 to 5,000 miles per hour. Now, are these rockets capable of carrying man out into space?
No.
The answer is no, they are not. Does this mean that we are going to have to wait many generations to be able to travel out into space? Not at all.
Oh.
Engineers have developed what they call a multi-staging. To illustrate that, I have a dummy of a rocket.
You are a dummy.
Supposing that this rocket were fired into space and a small rocket, auxiliary rocket, were carried in the nose, and when the first rocket had achieved its high speed, the second rocket is then fired on, doubling the speed of the first. In this way, with techniques now available, we can send a ship out into space.
This is the way the astronautical engineers tell us that we will reach outer space through these multi-stage rockets, and we will eventually arrive at and build a space station that will circle and circle and circle the Earth. But we must hold our curiosity for a moment about this space station because we have some questions to answer. Some of these questions concern speed, some fuel, and others the payload that we will carry. Now, to answer these questions, we are fortunate in having the professor of jet propulsion from Princeton University, Dr. Martin Summerfield.
Mr. Paul,
look at that!
These
look
questions
at that,
are indeed important.
Look at the on the wall there. You got North America right above South America.
We must provide answers to them before our design.
Check it out. Check it out. More residue for you, Brian.
Can begin to work. For the answers we provide determine in a large measure the kind of design he will achieve. Let's take them in order. How fast will this rocket fly? Now, it is well known that it takes a speed of 7 miles per second for a body to depart completely from the Earth's gravitational pull and escape completely from the Earth. Now, when a space rocket is given this speed by the action of its propulsion system, climbing first slowly through the atmosphere and then reaching its high speed outside of the atmosphere, it will be able to go away from the Earth and be capable of
oh dear.
remaining out there indefinitely, never to return. Or, if we wish, we can steer this ship so as to land either upon the moon or upon some nearby planet. Now, 7 miles per second is indeed a high speed. In more usual terms, let's put it in miles per hour. 7 times 60, 420 miles per minute. Times 60 minutes in an hour gives us 25,200 miles per hour. Now, 25,000 miles per hour is indeed a high speed. An alternative project suggests itself as at least the first step in conquering space.
Conquer these.
As Mr. Poole suggested, we might place a body in an orbit, circulating around the world. In this orbit, the body will behave as a stone at the end of a string. The Earth's gravitational pull substituting for the tension of the string, and the centrifugal force holding the body in its path. No additional propulsion energy will be required to maintain this body in its world-girdling flight, and so it will turn around in its flight once every 2 hours. Now, it takes a high speed, of course, to place the body in this circulating orbit. It has been calculated that a speed of 16,000 miles per hour, less than the 25,000 miles per hour, would be sufficient to bring this body with sufficient energy to continue indefinitely in its circular path. Let us assume that this is the answer we give our designer. As to the speed, 16,000 miles per hour. The next question he raised, what propellants shall we use in our space rocket? Now, in the past 30 years, a good deal of research has been carried out on fuels and oxidizers that might be used in liquid rocket engines. I have here 2 fuels that we might consider. The first,
look at that rocket, man.
Gasoline. Gasoline is a rather ordinary fuel. We're familiar with its properties. And indeed, it could be used in a rocket engine. Now, gasoline, however, is not the most energetic of fuels. There are other compounds that might provide higher energy and consequently be more effective for our purpose. Among these more effective compounds, I have here one, hydrazine. Hydrazine, you can see, is a liquid and looks like water, but a good deal more hazardous to handle. I wouldn't want it to spill on my skin, and I would keep it away from ordinary equipment. Now, hydrazine provides greater energy than gasoline, but, of course, because of its hazardous nature, special equipment is required in its handling and loading the rocket. There are more energetic fuels than hydrazine, but these offer even greater hazards, or in some cases are more expensive, or in other cases are more difficult to manufacture. And so, among the large number of compounds that might be chosen, hydrazine stands out as at least one of the contenders as a fuel for a space rocket. Now, what about oxidizers? Here we have 2 oxidizers. The first, liquid oxygen. Now, liquid oxygen, of course, is the most natural one we would think of because it is oxygen in the air that supports combustion. Of course, we couldn't carry gaseous oxygen because the tank required to be too large. And so, in liquid form, we have a more convenient form of the oxidizer. But notice this property of liquid oxygen. I pour it into a tin can representative of the tank that might be loaded. It boils away rather vigorously. This limitation of liquid oxygen has suggested to chemists and chemical engineers to search for alternative oxidizers. One such alternative is nitric acid. Nitric acid does not boil away, but of course it is highly corrosive. And so again, we require special equipment to transport and to load nitric acid into the tanks of our rocket. But with such special equipment, taking care to keep it away from skin, from equipment, and from instruments, we can successfully use this oxidizer. Now, let us consider this combination for a moment. Hydrazine as a fuel, nitric acid as an oxidizer. This combination offers an interesting property. I can illustrate this property by the simple experiment that I'm going to perform here. Here I have, in a beaker, a small quantity of hydrazine. Here I have below it, in a crucible, a small quantity of nitric acid. I'm going to tip the beaker remotely so as to allow the hydrazine to pour into the nitric acid. Now watch closely what will happen.
Boom! He's dead. Big swing, feeling no
This is the
pain.
property I wanted to illustrate. Spontaneous flame upon contact. Now, this property of igniting spontaneously is a most useful one because it assures the maintenance of steady combustion, continuous combustion, in our rocket motor. There is no danger now of the rocket flame blowing out, and therefore, more reliable operation is assured. Now, although this is a most useful and quite practical propellant combination, there are others that might be used. Rocket engineers have suggested a number of other practical possibilities. However, for the balance of our discussion, let us assume that this combination is the one for our space rocket. The next question our designer asked, what payload shall our rocket carry? We must answer this so that he knows what weight and what space he shall provide. Of course, the first flights out into space will undoubtedly be instrumented, pilotless rocket ships. These will be for the purpose of gathering experience in such flights, and also for the purpose of gathering physical data from the high reaches of the upper atmosphere and from the regions out in space. But eventually, as we gather experience and as we know more about the characteristics of the atmosphere and of space, the first flight, piloted, will be attempted. And then, when we have this information, we will be able to tell our designer just what provisions he shall make for crew and cargo. Well, these were the three questions he raised. There are others, of course, that will come up in the course of the design. But bear in mind that today we know several propellant combinations that might be used successfully in the propulsion system of a space rocket. We also know the principles upon which we can base the design of at least the rocket motors of our space rocket. In recent years, several designs have been put forth by rocket engineers of ships that might reach into the outer space.
Oh yeah, look at this dumb ship.
Dr. Von Braun,
Huh.
who will speak to
We
you
ain't never
next
seen
week
nothing
on
like
this
that.
program,
Yeah,
has
they didn't
proposed
use
a
that.
three-stage rocket. I have here a model of it. The lower stage, the middle stage, and the last stage. The last stage carrying in its nose the cabin containing the crew and equipment. Let us consider this rocket for a moment. Here I have a drawing of it. This drawing is placed alongside of a one-family dwelling to illustrate its towering size. It stands 300 feet high. It measures 65 feet across in the diameter at the base. It weighs 14 million pounds when loaded with hydrazine and nitric acid.
14 million pounds.
And at the start of its takeoff, it delivers a thrust of 10,000 tons. 10,000 tons is a force sufficient to raise a medium-sized passenger-carrying ocean liner right out of the water. Now let's examine the interior of this rocket. I'll remove the outer skin to show it. Here we have the lower stage. Here we have the middle stage, and then the upper stage. In this upper stage is the cabin. The rocket motors here deliver the starting thrust. Here we have hydrazine, here we have nitric acid, pipes lead the fuel and oxidizer respectively into the rocket motors. When the pilot flips the switch, the rocket motors start to fire, the ship rises from the ground and starts accelerating on its outward flight. Now, after a couple of minutes of operation, the lower stage has exhausted itself. It no longer serves a useful function. It is cast away. Propulsion is taken over by the middle stage. It delivers its thrust for a couple of minutes, and then it too has served its function, and it is cast away. The final stage, carrying the cabin containing crew and cargo to the final velocity of 16,000 miles per hour, takes over the job, and our propulsion period is complete. Now our spaceship can continue in its free coasting flight into the circling orbit around the Earth. Let's look for a moment at what our occupants are doing. Here we see the crew reclining in special couches. These couches are intended for support against the force arising from the high acceleration during the firing period. After the firing period, of course, they can leave their couches and move freely about in the cabin, carrying on their duties and taking scientific observations. This, Mr. Poole, is the general type of spaceship that might be used in the first piloted flight out into space. Of course, bear in mind that before this flight can be attempted, there will be many flights of pilotless, instrumented rockets for the purpose of gathering much more experience before we would attempt piloted flight.
Standing 24 stories high and weighing thousands and thousands of tons, it's very difficult for us to realize that such a giant can rise from a launching ramp, be forced up through our atmosphere, and careen off into space. Yet we know that one day this will happen.
No.
When the engineers have designed the rocket, when they have decided on the exact propellants that they're going to use, when they have built this rocket, when they have put it in their launching ramp, when men are standing about tensely waiting for
5
the
minutes.
final word to launch this rocket into space, the world will be looking at them. The world will be wondering how this is going to come about. But when this day comes, around this rocket there will be technicians, there will be all sorts of people working on the preparations. When these have been completed, the first spaceship will be standing solidly, ready for its launching. And then the captain of this spaceship will be the last man to enter. He will enter his spaceship, and the doors will be sealed behind him.
Space Force.
Everyone will grow tense, tenser, even tenser. And on the ground, men will watch, and then a very calm voice will start counting.
I thought said everybody
10,
broke tits.
9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, fire!
The fiery and powerful gases from the first unit will rush from the tail of the rocket with a roar heard for miles. Slowly, awkwardly, the rocket will rise from the ground. Then, gathering momentum, it will force its way straight up from the ground with such increased acceleration that within 15 seconds it will have disappeared from sight, leaving only a vapor trail in the sky to mark its path.
This is John Hopkins.
Rising to a height of more than 30 miles and traveling at a speed of more than 5,000 miles an hour, the automatic pilot will take command and tilt the rocket into its trajectory. Almost at the same instant, the fuel from the tail section, the first stage, will have been consumed. The tail section will be cast off and will parachute back to Earth. Traveling nearly 15,000 miles an hour, the center section will be dropped away, and the third stage will give the rocket its final thrust, which will send it hurtling along its orbital course. Now, in its orbit, the rocket will continue to fly around and around the Earth. Only man-made mechanical devices can ever stop the projectile as it hurtles through space. The rocket has entered the dark, vast area we call outer space, the extent of which, the limits of which, no one knows. It is speeding on its way to the space station.
There we go. Now they're going to show you the space station, the first ever space station design.
The Johns Hopkins Science Review is produced by Lynn Poole in association with Robert Fenwick and...
This is the DuMont Television Network.
DuPont.
The Johns Hopkins Science Review, presented by the Johns Hopkins Institutions and WAAM in Baltimore. This is the Johns Hopkins University, famed for 76 years for its contributions to learning and scientific research. Here in the many laboratories, Hopkins scientists are probing into the secrets of science.
During the last 2 weeks, many of you have written to us and asked us if we could suggest a number of things that you could read to follow your interest in space travel, and I would like to suggest to you this week's issue of Collier's magazine, in which you will find another article by our guest of this week to tell you more about traveling to the moon. And then some of you have asked about books. I think you might be interested in this book called Across the Space Frontier. In it, you will find many articles written by many of the guests who have appeared on the Johns Hopkins Science Review space programs. Well, now, you'll remember that 2 weeks ago, we demonstrated that human beings can live out into space when they are catapulted out there with a rocket. Now, if proper precautions are taken, if these men are equipped with pressurized suits, such as the man that you see here who is floating in the vacuum of space, you will probably also remember that these men must be protected against the meteors, the cosmic rays, the ultraviolet rays, and all the other dangers that one might find out in space. But then we next ask the question, what sort of rocket will take us out into space? Now, of course, the astronautical engineers describe this kind of rocket, the three-stage rocket that will start from the Earth and drop one stage, another stage, and then finally reach the outside. Now, this is the general type that we discussed. Now, the motors create a backward thrust, and out the rocket goes into space. But let's come back to Earth for a moment. How does this three-stage rocket make its way out into space? Do you remember how we demonstrated this?
Demonstrated.
With a roar that is heard miles from the launching site, a cyclone of gas and fire will push from the tail of the rocket with such force that the reaction will push the rocket upward. Moving slowly for 1 second, the rocket will gather momentum, gain speed, and force its way upward with increasing velocity, until within a few seconds it will disappear from sight, leaving only a vapor trail to trace its path through the sky. Last week, we illustrated the way the three-stage rocket rises from the Earth and tilts into its trajectory. Gaining terrific speed, the fuel in the tail section will be burned and the section will be jettisoned, parachuting back to Earth. Then the central section will take over, being ejected in its turn. And finally, the third stage will push the rocket out into space. The rocket is now a man-made satellite, circling the Earth until some man-made mechanism brings it down or sends it out further into space.
Now, as you know from last week, this giant rocket that is circling around and around and around the Earth is carrying men and carrying materials to build a giant space station, 1,075 miles above the Earth. Well, now, how will this space station be built? What will it look like? And what will its use be? Now, these are questions that can be answered by our guest of the evening, internationally known rocket engineer who is now technical director of the Guided Missiles Group at Redstone Arsenal. Our guest for this week, Dr. Werner von Braun.
Werner von Braun, the Nazi.
As Mr. Poulos told you, we expect to build a giant satellite station 1,075 miles above the surface of the Earth. At that altitude, way beyond the atmosphere, the station will revolve around the Earth once in 2 hours. What will this station look like? Well, we might liken it to this gyroscope, the kind your children play with. Our space station will be a great circular wheel. The outer rim, right here, will be for the living.
Okay, this is good. This is when they show you the first space station. But wait for it. Wait till they tell you. Wait till this famous Nazi right here tells you how high the space station is going to be. Okay, because the ISS they claim is like 230 miles up or something like that. But the plans for this space station were to be a lot higher than that. 1,000 and something miles up.
And working areas for the space scientists and the crews. Then here in the center will be another area forming the hub, the space station. As you already know, everything is weightless in space. So the entire station will be in a constant spin so that the centrifugal acceleration in the rim will replace the missing gravity. The space station will rotate about its hub once in 22 seconds. The station looks like a tremendous inner tube, doesn't it? The actual space station will have to be built of some nylon reinforced plastic so that the station segments can be shipped to the outer orbit in a collapsed condition. Up in the orbit, the wheel-shaped station will be assembled from these sections and ultimately inflated like a tire. Of course, this inner tube affair you see here would not be strong enough to withstand the bombardment it will receive from tiny meteors, the size of a pea or less, which are pretty abundant in space. It also needs protection against the sandblasting it will take from the microscopic meteoric dust, which Dr. Strong told you about 2 weeks ago. If punctured by large or small meteors, the air pressure inside would rush out, create a vacuum, and crush the men inside the station. So our inner tube needs protection by an outer shell of sheet metal. Underneath this shell, we must have a space which separates the outer shell from the inner lining. This skin or outer shell is called the meteor bumper, taking the shock of meteors which evaporate upon impact. You remember that 3 weeks ago Dr. Haber said it was up to the astronautical engineers to protect men against meteors. Well, this bumper on rockets and satellite stations is a method by which we hope to protect the spacemen, so that we may live safely in outer space. Astronomers tell us that we need not be afraid of the bigger meteors because they are few and far between in empty space, and chances are that we may stay there for 1,000 years in that outer orbit without a chance of ever being hit. But let's come back to our station again. Here we have portholes covered with glass, a type of glass which will filter the devastating ultraviolet rays and prevent them from entering the space station and harming the men inside. As the station spins slowly through space, it will be in constant contact with the Earth. So we will naturally need antenna, perhaps here at the top of the hub, to receive radio messages and television pictures from colleagues on Earth. Some men will work outside the station, and we must place safety hooks at the outside of the hub so they may fasten themselves to the station with safety lines. Remember, they are weightless and might float away. You may have wondered what these black patches are. They are the furnaces, the generators of the heating system for the station. Absorbing the heat of the sun, the blackened areas will transmit this heat inside. At the shaded side, the blackened areas serve as coolers, radiating excessive heat into outer space. A central circulation system will distribute the temperature-controlled air evenly throughout the station. This, then, is a quick view of the great satellite, which will be constructed out in space, over 1,000 miles beyond our Earth, placed there to study.
You hear that? 1,000 miles beyond Earth. 1,000, not 220.
the universe and provide a launching site for the exploration of the universe, the planets, and the moon.
Good luck with that.
Did you notice what I said just then? I said a space station constructed in outer space, over 1,000 miles beyond the Earth. If we are going to place it there, someone has to build it. But how? With the knowledge we have and with the rockets we will build, this building should not be too difficult.
A rocket of the type with which you are now familiar will leave the Earth, shoot its way up through the atmosphere and out into space at carefully calculated direction and speed. This three-stage rocket will carry men and materials with which to build part of the space station. When it reaches the 1075-mile orbit and starts around the Earth, the workmen, dressed in pressurized suits, will leave the rocket and take out the materials they have brought for construction. These pieces will be fitted together bit by bit with ease as they float, weightless, in space. When one crew has finished its celestial construction, it will climb aboard its rocket and return to Earth. A steady stream of spacebound and, alternately, earthbound supply ships will cause the space station to grow steadily larger. With one section completed, other rockets will arrive from Earth with more parts, other sections to be added to the slowly growing space station, until one day, the space station will be completed, rotating around its own axis as it circles the Earth. But let's see what the interior of the space station will look like. The bulbous, sausage-like object you see here is a space jeep, which will taxi new arrivals from the transport to the space station. When this space jeep approaches the space station, it noses into a strong net-like berth. Here they will find storage.
We got a space car and a space jeep.
Rooms and equipment necessary to supply the men who will operate the space satellite. Down the corridor, one may well find an astronomical observatory, where scientists are studying the mysteries of the planets, nebulae, and the hundreds of other phenomena which we will never unravel until we can establish this station in space. Undoubtedly, there will be a Weather Bureau unit aboard the station, where meteorologists will study the weather over the entire Earth. Here on the upper level is such a Weather Bureau. From this height, the eyes of the space station scientists will sweep every inch of the entire surface of the Earth every 2 hours. They will learn much about weather and send back weather reports every 2 hours. Under this room, the visitor would find great television screens with pictures of what is going on down below. A vast panorama of everything happening on Earth, as the space station passes in its orbit around our world.
We could take you further on an exploration, on a tour of this space station through room after room filled with electronic equipment, laboratories that will be used by the men who are out there on this space station. We could wind our way up circular stairs because this space station will probably be built 3 stories high. But this will give you some conception of what a space station will be, how it will be built, and gives you a brief glimpse of it as an activity base in our celestial sky. Now, the thought of this fabulous space station almost defies our imagination, but it will be there. It will be built, shining like a new star out in outer space. Now, it will be the greatest laboratory ever built, from which men will study the other planets and learn a tremendous amount about this Earth on which we live. But it will be something else. It will be the base from which moonships will take off on their way to the moon, the second stage in man's conquest of space.
The space station provides us with a point of departure. The orbital speed of the station, 15,800 miles per hour, provides already the greatest portion of the speed required for a trip to the moon. At the same time, the moonship need not cope with the aerodynamical problems of flight through the atmosphere and therefore need not even streamlining. As a matter of fact, the ship capable of flying from a satellite station to the moon will be a far cry from those sleek and beautiful streamlined rocket ships we all know from science fiction. It will be an ugly, functional design as the one you see here. Up here in this nacelle, a spherical, hollow container will live the crew. There will be the captain, the navigation room, living and dining quarters, and storage room, plus the entire guidance and navigation equipment. Down here are the propellant containers. There are 18 of them, with a total capacity of 800,000 gallons of hydrazine, which will be put into the upper tanks, and nitric acid in the lower tanks. These propellants will be fed into the rocket motors that you see here. There are 30 rocket motors. Some of them can be hinged to control the ship in flight. Others in the center are rigid. After these 5 days, our unpowered elliptical flight to the moon will intercept the moon's orbit. Now we have to turn the ship around and land on the moon tail first. Shortly before we reach the moon, we will pass the famous neutral point, the dividing line between the Earth's gravitational field and the moon's field, and from that point on, our fall towards the moon's surface will become faster and faster. At an altitude of 550 miles above the moon's surface, we have to turn the rocket motors on again for the retarding blast. And a little instrument which measures the altitude and at the same time our rate of descent will see to it and control the thrust in such a way that the rate of descent becomes 0 at the moment the altitude is 0. That means, in other words, that the ship will settle down on the moon like a helicopter. Once on the moon, we can shed these outer tanks too, and only the inner tanks of the ship are needed for the return flight to Earth. In one kind of our 3 ships, there will be no inner tanks, but they will be replaced by a cargo container. This ship is designed for the one-way flight only, and we will abandon this ship on the moon. The equivalent of the propellants of the round-trip ships in this ship will be payload, and in this way we are actually in a position to carry a very substantial amount of payload to the moon.
Up here on the space station, 1,075 miles above you, we are waiting for the arrival of more material with which to build the moon rockets. Rockets are arriving in our orbit and are pulling alongside of our space station. because the rocket speed is the same as our space station. Workmen have been working for some time on constructing the moon ships. The ships have been built out in space much as the space station was constructed. The parts for the moon ship have reached us in predetermined order, so that workmen assemble the parts, putting them together like giant jigsaw puzzles. Let's look into the interior of one of these moon ships. Here in the interior of the ship is the great globe at the top where the crew will live and work on their long trip. We see the special equipment and instruments they will need. The men will work in reclining positions, strapped to their positions so they will not float away from their instruments. Even at the dinner table, the men will be strapped to their seats. The food containers will move in tracks around the large circular dinner table so as not to float around the room. The crew members in their pressurized suits will go through an airlock before going out into space to work on the outside of the ship as it makes its long journey. Lines will hold them fast to the ship so that they will not float away in space. But now the moon ships are loaded, ready to take off from the space station. Everyone is tense. We are certain that you on Earth will view this historic takeoff because it is scientifically possible for television cameras here on the space station to transmit this event to you. The last-minute checkups are being made. Everyone is a bit nervous. And now, there, the flash you just saw was the ignition of the 90 rocket motors. Now here's the cargo ship as it takes off, moving slowly at first, then gaining speed as it leaves the space station until it is traveling at a rate of 19,500 miles an hour. After the first powerful thrusts of its rocket ends, it coasts on its own momentum. Empty fuel tanks are jettisoned and will float free and crash on the moon. Inside the ship, 3 flywheels are set in motion. These cause the ship to turn and fall toward the moon tail first. The rocket motors are turned on to act as a brake as the ship comes closer and closer to the surface of the moon. Now one of the ships is settling on the moon. The steel claws will be ejected from the sides of the ship as it lands gently. The first spaceship, the first human beings have landed on the moon.
Never.
Here you see the passenger ships, the exploration on the moon completed, taking off for the return trip from the moon to the space station's orbit.
Now, no matter how comfortable it may be on a space station or what may be found on the moon or how comfortable it is on the moon, no one wants to be left out there without a return ticket. A man who goes wants to be sure, very sure, that he will come back to Earth. How will this be accomplished? Well, if we know we can get out there, we certainly can get back, and Dr. Van Braun can tell us exactly how that will happen.
I will make you a quick sketch of the path to be followed by the rockets who returns from the space station's orbit. This here is the Earth, and this shady ring around the Earth is the atmosphere. Up here is our orbit, and our space station travels along at a rate of 15,800 miles per hour through the orbit. Now we take the upper stage of our space rocket around and retard that motion a little bit by giving it a rocket blast in this direction. We thereby retard the speed by 1,070 miles per hour so that our ship is now slightly slower than the orbit. As a consequence, our ship will go into an elliptical path which at this point here will cut into the atmosphere at an altitude of about 50 miles. At this moment, the ship will have entered the atmosphere nose first, and now the aerodynamical drag in the atmosphere will make itself felt. We now keep the ship in the atmosphere and retard the flight with aerodynamic drag. We make a complete glide half around the Earth, and at this point, almost directly underneath the point where we left the orbit, we will be down to sonic speed. Our altitude at this point will be 15 miles up. From this altitude, our ship can spiral down like a normal airliner and can finally land on the ground on a landing gear, and the landing speed will be no greater than 65 miles an hour.
Now, exploration of the outer reaches of this vast universe in which we live will bring new benefits. It'll bring new benefits for one reason, because scientists never forget that the ultimate results of their curiosity, of their brilliant research, of their investigation in laboratory on land and sea and into the universe is for one use only, and that is to make our lives a better life, a happier life, and we very much hope a more peaceful life. Now, those among us who bemoan the lack of new frontiers, who say that the pioneering spirit is past, who say that there are no new frontiers to conquer, these people are very wrong, because as you have seen during the past 3 weeks, there are new frontiers, and the astronautical engineers and the astrophysicists are working and studying so that we may pass that frontier, a frontier that reaches hundreds and thousands of miles above us. Now, one day, perhaps in your lifetime, and I very much hope in mine, that some cumbersome men in pressurized spacesuits will walk very carefully and very slowly and enter a rocket, and this rocket will be catapulted up through our atmosphere out into space. And there in space, they will come alongside a spaceship, a space station, the type of station that we have shown you this week. And from that station, a moonship of the type that Dr. von Braun has described will then take off, and it will go to the moon. And we will one day be able to see the other side of that moon, the other face that man has never seen. And we'll photograph that side, and we'll see exactly what there is there. Now, why? Because we must probe the mysteries of the universe, of upper atmosphere. We must also know a great deal more about our own Earth. And from this space station, 1,075 miles above the Earth, as you have seen by radar, by radio, and by television, scientists will use this space station as a laboratory, and they'll look down on the whole face of the Earth. Perhaps it will have a great deal to do with weather, to know what weather is. They can tell us what weather is coming. There'll be many more things that they can tell us when they build this space station. And speaking for myself, I, for one, believe they will do it. Well, now, after all this, what is there left to say but ask you one question? Do you remember that 3 weeks ago, I showed you this ticket, this round-trip ticket to the moon? After having seen these 3 programs on space, what do you say now?
Take that ticket and stick it.
Do you think we'll make it? Well, next week we're going to ask you a question that I'm sure a lot of you are wondering about. You've heard a lot about the so-called electronic brain. You've heard how it does mathematical problems at fantastic speed, how it can sit down and play chess with men. Well, how much of this is scientific fact? Next week we'll ask the question and answer it. Can machines think?
In the last 6 years, machines have been invented that can solve difficult mathematical problems. And they are hard at work solving these problems for industry, government, and science. Some of these automatic computers, the so-called electronic brains, can do over 1,000 additions in a single second. Most computers have memories, and some can make choices. But does this mean that man has actually invented machines that can think for themselves?
Dun, 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 dun.
Next week, we are going to show you one of these high-speed electronic automatic computers. One of the men who invented them is going to show you how they work and what they can really do. Next week, you will see the scientists' answer to the question, can machines think? The Johns Hopkins Science Review is produced by Lynn Poole in association with Robert Fenwick and Warren Whiteman. Directed by Paul Kane. Assistant Director, Ed Sarrow. Art direction is by Barry Mansfield. Your narrator has been Joel Chaseman.
Wow. I tell you, I've never heard of that series from John Hopkins, and I have, never seen more fantasy, sci-fi, space farce crap in my life. Oh my gosh, man. How about that dang space station that looked like the one from one of these movies. I can't think of the movie, but there was one that they had that looked like that, and maybe a couple movies they've had one shaped like that, but and 1,000 miles up, too. That's so funny, man. Oh boy. So good to see everybody here tonight. There's been a pretty steady crowd of, around 20 people, and all fabulous all stars. Angela, Christian Knapp, Tommy Paint, Brian Stabley, RT, Voynich, Matt Pyman. I don't know if I said Rick Swain, but yeah, Rick Swain. Freedom Grower, and many others. Toran Suki or something. I don't know. Zulu One was in the house. Singe Man. Yep. Good people in the house, man. So yeah, anytime I find some crazy space farce stuff like that, I've got to share it with you guys because it's just funny and just not much has changed though, really. Yeah, it's the same old bull crap propaganda. Just enough, they keep people interested in space so they can take their money, keep them distracted, so on and so on. Let's see. I think that was everything. I want to show this flag footage again because that was so good. You hardly ever see a flag like this with the red under the stars. See the red under the stars. Gotta love it. And those were veterans marching. be seen. But the rest is flat. It's fucking flat. Woo! It's fucking flat. Ooh, it's fucking flat. Yes, it is, Mr. Knapp. Woo, woo, woo. It definitely is. Oh no. Y'all didn't tell me I wasn't screen sharing. Why didn't y'all tell me sooner? Oh man, I played Christian Knapp's whole song. Yeah, okay. My bad. Alright, so let's back this up. I know now. I see that. You should have it now.
Hello everyone, meet Lucy, student in psychology, and me, her digital ID wallet issued by the government to offer a wide range of identity services. In fact, I'm a handy way of proving and protecting her identity both online and face-to-face. Let's have a closer look at what I can do. I can help governments to better communicate with citizens. Right now, I'm reminding Lucy of the appointment she needs to schedule for her mandatory vaccination.
No, thank you.
Time to go to her exam. Lucy is a bit stressed out. I'm here to make it easy for her to prove she is the right candidate, with a quick and secure connection between her phone and the examiner's. Exam passed successfully. Quick stop at the doctor's before celebrating, and no time to lose. On the way, Lucy uses me to declare her passport lost. She needs it for her upcoming road trip. No issue. She can request an emergency digital passport without having to go to the authority office.
Imagine
I
that.
make official admin a lot smoother. And that's not all. I can also help Lucy request a birth certificate, pay her taxes, or prove who she is when onboarding to new services, such as opening a bank account. I allow Lucy to certify her healthcare coverage entitlement. She's able to decide whether to authorize the doctor to access her medical records or not, ensuring her control over her personal data. Lucy needs one more thing before being all set for her trip to Australia: renting a car. I help her share her driver's license credentials online, so that she doesn't have to wait hours in a queue to collect the car when she gets to Brisbane. The rental company benefits from secure and accurate information, and Lucy from a smooth experience. Lucy's friends are waiting for her inside the bar. To allow her to get in, I simply generate a QR code that proves Lucy is old enough, so she doesn't have to share all her ID details with the bar staff. So yes, I'm Lucy's best companion. I protect her identity and official credentials wherever she goes. I provide secured access to public and private services and allow her to have full control over her data privacy. In other words, I give the right access to the right data to the right person. I am also trusted by governments to best support countries' digital transformation, fight against ID fraud, and deliver smooth public services. I am the Talis Digital ID Wallet.
can I get one, please? Not good grief. Oh,
Finally,
boy.
my brethren, be strong in the Lord, and in the power of his might. Put on the whole armor of God, that ye may be able to stand against the wiles of the devil. For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. Wherefore take unto you the whole armor of God.
Woo, boy, oh boy, oh boy. It's a creepy world. And millennials like that stuff. They're all in. They'll take the digital wallet and the digital tattoos and, eventually the mark of the beast. I mean, they like anything trendy and cool and digital. Yeah. Woo, woo, woo. It's unbelievable. DARPA Pandemic Invention Platform 2017, way before COVID, 2017. Of course, I have videos proving that DARPA, designed this whole bull crap that we're dealing with. DARPA's trying to is making food from water and air. DARPA's goal is to develop a microbial food production system capable of producing food using only air, electricity, and water. DARPA is trying to modernize its food supply chain for military use and for humanitarian assistance. To do this, it's seeking proposals to assist in developing novel designs and testing methods capable of manufacturing microbial origin products. Well, thank you. Franken fries for you. Some Franken fries. Yeah. Give me some Franken fries. You can already get those at McDonald's. Oh, dear. I can't stand this world. Woo, woo, woo. So, anyway, that series that we were watching earlier was John Hopkins, I'm not going to say John's because it was John for me. John Hopkins Science Review. This one is on fear. I haven't watched it. I don't know what it's about other than, fear and what they're going to say. But, yeah, there's apparently 178 or 180 episodes. So we saw a few of the space ones. I might check out some of their other ones and pick out some to watch that are funny. But yeah, I think that's about gonna do it. We watched everything that I had for us to watch. I wish the song would have acted right. The Flat Earth Mind Control to Make Tom, but that didn't sound right at all when I played it. That sucks. Maybe if I play it on YouTube. Is that it? Space Odyssey? It sucks. Oh, going over to my laptop now. Yeah, that's it. Why is it so low?
Ground control to Major Tom. Ground control to Major Tom. Take your protein pills and put your helmet on. Ground control to Major Tom. 7, 6. Commencing countdown, engines on. 3, 2. Check ignition and may God's love be with you. This is ground control to Major Tom. You've really made the grade.
No, that's not the Flat Earth one. Dang it, man. That is not the song. That's all. That's crazy. Not there. What's the name of it? Flat Earth, Mind Control to Major Tom. That's what I put in there. Let me just try it one more time. No, that don't sound right.
And in case there are any conspiracy theorists out there, how would you prove to us that you're in zero gravity?
Major Tom.
Mind control to Major Tom. Earth is flat and there's a dome above us all. This is mind control to Major Tom. We've fooled the human race. Now the existence of God is so far away. Mind control to Major Tom. Mind control to Major Tom.
Flat dome above us all. sound good.
Mind control to Major Tom.
All right, we're gonna let Christian Knapp sing fucking flat, not me.
Well, they tell us they're exploring outer space, but it's all fake. It's fucking fake. $60 million every day is what we pay. They fucking take. 'Cause we're brainwashed, trained to believe man-made dark cosmology, a trap set by evil fuckers many centuries ago to dupe the population and take control of the world. Seen it all before, it's the oldest play in the book. Fiction for souls by baiting the devil's hook. Wizards and warlocks practicing evil and magic cooked up a plan and they called the plan science. Sprinkled all their bullshit with some formulas and math to make themselves look brilliant, 'cause only they understand. Gain the faith of the masses as they push theories and lies, trying to make us slaves and feel God lives inside. God lives inside. So they try to make us godless inside. So we all roll over and say, go ahead, NASA. Have your fucking way. Why can't we see so much farther than they say? 50 miles plus across the ocean on a clear blue day. Why would they say it's a mirage you're looking at? Yeah, right, that's not science. That's just a load of bogus math. Use your eyes and a zoom lens. Spot an object far across the sea. That's all it takes to prove there's no bend to be seen. Look for any curve and it just leads you to the fact. We got hills and valleys, but the rest is flat. It's fucking flat. Ooh, it's fucking flat. Ooh, it's fucking flat. Ooh, it's fucking flat.
And that is that. Woo, woo. Hey guys, while I got you here, of course, live right here on my main YouTube channel. But what I wanted to show you was my playlists, because now today I just found out that a bunch of my playlists were not public. So now you can see all these different Mandela effect residue ones that I have, and I'm going to start adding to them every day. Different ones. I've got Haas avocados. I've got Solomon Brothers, not Salomon. I've got the airliners engine, the placement. Richard Simmons, Procter & Gamble, The Flag, of course, John Hopkins, and many other ones. Lucy, you got some explaining to do. There's a bunch of playlists. Oscar Mayer. Then just Mandela effect related videos. I try to update all these playlists, as much as I can. Flat Earth. Then you got got Mark of the Beast stuff, CV-19 vax propaganda stuff. I just started this one, I guess, a few days ago or something. But you see the headline on that one: Pentagon to penalize unvaxxed soldiers. They are refusing thousands upon thousands of soldiers the right to an exemption based on religious beliefs. So if y'all think they're just gonna cave in and let anybody get away with not being unvaccinated, without getting vaccinated, I'm telling you, look out, because they really are going to cramp down on everybody in the next year or two to get vaccinated, and try to make it harder and harder for people that don't get vaccinated. But we don't live in fear of that. That's the best thing. We know not to live in fear, and we know that we will thrive. We will survive and thrive, and no weapon formed against us will prosper, because we have the eyes to see and the ears to hear. Now, you can say that we were chosen, and that's the only reason that we have the eyes to see and the ears to hear, but we also worked to get to that point too. It wasn't that, we're just chosen by God, or we're just, lucky. We actually have done a lot of things, most of us, to get where we're at. We can see through all of these agendas and all this evil tyranny and fake stuff. Still got almost a dozen people here. I think people thought I was going to wrap up the show, and who knows? Been on for almost 3 hours now, but let me stop screen sharing again. It feels good to be back with my show, The Real Talk True Show. I was live earlier today, twice actually. I was live just on D Live earlier, and I shared part of what I shared here today. But this morning I had a Mandela Effect residue show, and if you haven't seen that, you can go over and check that out on my main YouTube channel, or it's on D Live or Twitch. Excuse me. 7 minutes to 4:20 somewhere. Brian's going to sleep because he's so anxious about leaving tomorrow for Florida, I bet. So he wants to get rested up. Wow. I'm gonna throw the link out there if anybody wants to join me, just to talk about any of the space farce crap, or to a certain extent the current psyop crap 19 whatever. But if we get anybody in here joining me, I might stick around for a little while and talk. By the way, when I first started my show, The Real Talk True Show, I used to have, 2, 3, 4, 5 people join me, or more, whatever, some shows. But I miss those days. We had some good talks. Mad Pieman, Voynich, Brian, many others, join me. And, it's great when we can just connect, because a lot of us can't afford to just go to Flattoberfest or Flat Atlantic or whatever. I had definitely planned to go to Flat Atlantic, but things happen and now I can't go. But it's it is what it is. I'm not gonna cry about it. Maybe for a minute. All right. Anyway, so yeah, I'm on live right now on YouTube, Twitch, and D Live. My Facebook is deactivated for a little while, a week or two. Yeah, the minimum's a week now. You used to be able to just deactivate it for as long as you wanted, but not anymore. Thank you, Brian. Before he goes to sleep, I want to thank him. He bought me a microphone that's, I guess, coming in the mail this week, and I really appreciate it, because I know I sound like crap right now. I'm practically yelling too, just to make sure y'all can hear me. Yeah, I really appreciate it, brother man. And it's gonna be nice to have a good microphone that I can talk to you people, you good peoples. So, alrighty. Doesn't look like anybody's going to join, but I'll give it a few more minutes. Might play another song. I don't know. And I look forward to getting back into research mode more often. And yeah, Brian says the same mic he has, and he showed me the picture, and that's pretty cool. So I really, really, really appreciate it, no doubt. Woo-hoo-hoo. All right, let's see here for a second. Look at all that. Huh. Wonder what that is.
So, the two organizations
have
had a long history of corroboration ever since 1916. And when the Johns Hopkins School of Hygiene and Public Health was...
She said John Hopkins, and it's right there in the title. Rockefeller Footprints, John Hopkins, John, not Johns, Hopkins University School of Hygiene and Public Health. What she's talking about, the relationship between the evil Rockefellers and John Hopkins.
Founded with funding from the Rockefeller Foundation. Since then, they have become inseparable. So, now we have Johns Hopkins University.
Oh, now she says John.
And the Rockefellers Foundation since 1916, and they are in bed together.
John Hopkins. Got John Hopkins again. Pandemic footprint, the Rockefeller Foundation and John Hopkins University.
This morning, we are verifying if the COVID-19 pandemic was predicted nearly a decade ago. That's the social media claim circulating as more states put restrictions back into place. Jason Puckett is sorting out fact from fiction.
Let's start with the claim that this lockdown was planned more than 10 years ago in the, quote, Rockefeller document. Now, there are a lot of claims in these posts. They say that the Rockefeller document talks about a contagious but low mortality rate virus, that it would have a weaponized version, that the virus would be transported between labs and smuggled out by China, that they'd fund government agencies and give them talking points and scripts, and that governments would coordinate a vaccine development and multiple lockdown phases. Okay, that's a lot. Let's verify. Did this Rockefeller document really predict the COVID pandemic? Our sources, the Johns Hopkins Data Tracker, the CDC, and the Rockefeller Foundation.
Who's your sources?
Our sources, the Johns Hopkins Data Tracker, the CDC, and the Rockefeller Foundation.
The takeover of the medical industry was accomplished by the takeover of the medical schools. Well, the people that we're talking about, Rockefeller and Carnegie in particular, came to the picture and said, we will put up money. They offered tremendous amounts of money to the schools that would agree to cooperate with them. The donors said to the schools, we're giving you all this money. Now, would it be too much to ask if we could put some of our people on your board of directors to see that our money is being spent wisely? Almost overnight, all of the major universities received large grants from these sources and also accepted 1, 2, or 3 of these people that I mentioned on their board of directors, and the schools literally were taken over by the financial interests that put up the money. Now, what happened as a result of that is that the schools did receive an infusion of money. They were able to build new buildings. They were able to add expensive equipment to their laboratories. They were able to hire top-notch teachers. But at the same time as doing that, they skewed the whole thing in the direction of pharmaceutical drugs.
Yep.
That was the efficiency in philanthropy. The doctors from that point forward in history would be taught pharmaceutical drugs.
That part.
All of the great teaching institutions in America were captured by the pharmaceutical interests in this fashion. And it's amazing how little money it really took to do it.
If you're fully vaccinated, you have an extraordinarily small chance of being hospitalized or dying from COVID. We're talking about more than 99.999% of fully vaccinated Americans surviving thanks to the vaccine.
I'm not that surprised because this virus is so transmissible, and what happens is as societies open up and people really think, okay, this is starting to be behind us, they go out and do more things, which is, of course, what they're supposed to be doing. But if you're unvaccinated, that's dangerous. And pretty much everyone who's unvaccinated is going to expect to get sick. And that's what you're seeing in these countries. Even though they have relatively high vaccination rates, it's just not high enough. And overwhelmingly, the people who are getting very sick are people who are unvaccinated.
But it would be much worse if they weren't vaxxed. Discuss that.
So the whole purpose of the vaccine is not to be this magic force field or a bug zapper and stop every infection post-vaccine. What the vaccines are meant to do is to make any infection you have after you've been vaccinated very light, mild, no symptoms, clinically insignificant, with a very, very low chance of hospitalization or death. So that's why the vaccines are a game changer. It tames the virus, removes its ability to cause serious disease, hospitalization, and death on a large scale. So if you get the infection when you're unvaccinated, it's basically Russian roulette about what happens to you, especially if you're in a high-risk group.
I'll take my chances.
Well, private enterprise has played a huge role. Remember that all of the vaccines developed in the U.S. were done as public-private partnerships. So that has been there. But I think what we've seen in the U.S. and what we're seeing right now, unfortunately, as cases creep up with the colder weather and heading toward Thanksgiving, is that the total immunization coverage in the U.S. is still under 60% of everyone in the country. And that's why we're still seeing over 100,000 new cases a day.
The Johns Hopkins Center for Health Security, in partnership with the World Economic Forum and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, hosted Event 201, a high-level pandemic exercise on October 18, 2019, in New York, New York. The exercise illustrated areas where public/private partnerships will be necessary during the response to a severe pandemic in order to diminish large-scale economic and societal consequences.
So now the average doctor goes through school, he gets a great education, he has to be really smart to get through it, he learns all about drugs, he doesn't know too much about basic nutrition. I found that the average wife of these physicians knows more about nutrition than he does, but they sure know their drugs. And if you go to your typical doctor today, I don't care what it is, chances are you're going to walk out of there with a prescription. Why? Because that's what he has been trained to do.
Yep. It's insane in the membrane. This whole ordeal is just so retarded, so moronic. Yeah. All right, guys and gals, I'm going to have to wrap it up. I don't have anything else for you. Nobody wants to join me to talk. So I'm going to call it a night. I've been on for 3 hours and 5 minutes. I will be back tomorrow, probably. Oh, that mother. Good seeing everybody here. I could do a bucket bong for you guys and gals. I've got one packed. I'm running late anyway. I was supposed to do one, so give me a second here. Oh boy. That ain't no tiny bowl on there. Big old bowl. Still burning. Hold it. Ooh, that one. If a bong hit makes you sweat, yeah, you're on the right path. Holy moly. It is Florida. It's hot here. It's going to be like near 80 degrees for the next few days here. It was near 80 degrees on Christmas. I got to go turn my AC on in a minute. This is hot. I'm hoping to get a bucket bong that you can flip over. It's an enclosed bucket bong, and you can use it for dabs or for flour. It's so amazing. I want one so bad. Man. Ooh. Yeah, I can't do that cold for too long, man. I mean, it'd get cold for a little while in Tennessee, and we'd get a little bit of snow where I was at, but it wasn't unbearable. But it'd be hard for me to live too many places out of the South. I'm a Southerner. Probably for life. Oh dear. Woo! Man, oh man. I do love snow though. I like to play in snow, snowball fights, just wouldn't want to deal with it every day, or even just every day in the winter or whatever. It's only snowed here like a handful of times in Florida, where it's snow and stick. When I was a kid, we came here to Pensacola, Florida, and they got like an inch, I think. Oh man. Holy boy. Well, I'm sure there's some other show on more entertaining than y'all just sitting here watching me. Ooh. Oh dear. But it feels good to be back, and it'll feel really good to have a good microphone soon. Oh man. All right. I'm gonna get up out of here, guys, gals. Much love. Tommy here, Tommy out. Thanks for tuning in.